Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right, with two completely different sets of memories just living inside your head.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare.
Right. Because in one set, you remember your actual life, the room you went to sleep in, your job, the people you know. But then right alongside that, overlapping it entirely, you remember an entire life that technically never existed.
Just a completely fabricated reality.
Exactly. You remember friends you made, a neighborhood you lived in, maybe even like a physical habit you picked up. And all of it is from a reality that was entirely made up. So how would you even know which thoughts were actually yours?
It creates this terrifying level of cognitive dissonance, really.
Yeah, how do you even begin to trust your own mind to make basic decisions?
Well, you have to think about how our brains are essentially just prediction engines, right? They're built entirely on past experiences.
Right, drawing on what we already know.
Exactly. So when the foundation of those past experiences just fractures into two competing timelines, the psychological toll isn't just confusing. It fundamentally breaks a person's ability to navigate the present moment.
And that is exactly what we are looking at today. Welcome to the deep dive. We've got this fascinating stack of classified logs from the USS Arawyn, and they document exactly what happens when a crew goes through that precise psychological nightmare.
This heavy one today.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the aftermath of a reality-bending mission. We're going to figure out how a human brain processes temporal trauma, how a crew rebuilds the truth when their own memories are compromised, and honestly, how command somehow files the official bureaucratic paperwork for the impossible.
Which might be the hardest part of all of it.
Seriously. But before we get into the therapy logs, let's set the stage. What exactly happened to this crew?
Right. So to ground you in what the crew is recovering from, we have to look at the inciting incident. The Arawyn discover this impossible topological anomaly.
A literal slice of a different time.
Yes, a displaced, fully functioning chunk of a 1984 California suburb, Sherman Oaks, specifically. And it's just sitting squarely in the middle of a barren, uncharted red planet.
Just totally out of nowhere.
Right. It came complete with confused civilians, running cars, radio broadcasts, all completely isolated from Earth.
Okay, so before we dig into the psychological fallout of being stuck in that, we kind of have to understand the mechanics of the entity that overwrote the away team's reality in the first place.
We do, yeah.
Because the logs refer to this 1984 construct not as a, naturally occurring time riff, but as a holding frame.
Right, a holding frame.
So what does that actually mean mechanically? Like, how does something just paste a Los Angeles suburb onto a red planet?
Well, the holding frame wasn't just a hologram or a simple illusion. The architect behind it was this being named Aster.
And Aster's?
Aster is categorized in the logs as a juvenile stage 4 of an incredibly advanced species known as the Meridian.
So basically a kid...
Yes, a very powerful kid. Aster essentially used localized manipulation of matter and probability to physically sustain that environment.
Wow.
And the thing is, he wasn't malicious at all. He was just trying to keep the frightened, displaced humans in the suburb happy by literally freezing the sunset.
Because they liked the evening light.
Exactly. But in doing so, he lost control of the temporal parameters.
Man, he's like this cosmic kid with god-level admin privileges.
That's a great way to put it.
It's like a child playing a reality simulator video game, right?
Yeah.
And he's tweaking the server settings to make the NPCs happy, but then his finger slips on the keyboard, he panics, and he accidentally spawns a fleet of 23rd century Klingon and Romulan warships in the sky above a 1984 neighborhood.
Which is just a surreal image.
Totally. And the entire simulation just buckles under the contradictory code.
I would actually take that video game analogy a step further. It is like a video game, but with one terrifying distinction. Aster couldn't just hit the reset button and wipe the slate clean.
Right, because real people were involved.
Exactly. The psychological damage he inflicted on the NPCs, meaning the Arawyn's away team and the civilians, was permanent. They physically lived those experiences.
It wasn't just a dream for them.
No, not at all. And the resolution of Aster's involvement really highlights this. He is ultimately confronted by an older Meridian named Leora.
I loved this part of the logs.
Yeah, she steps in to stabilize the collapse, but she doesn't just fix his mess and send him to his room. She forces him to look at the terrified humans.
That interaction is so striking. Aster is, hiding behind the fact that the Starfleet crew is terrified of him. He almost seems to be using their terror to justify his own massive power.
Right, like their fear validates him. But Leora immediately dismantles that defense. She teaches him this profound lesson about accountability that translates perfectly to human leadership, honestly.
What does she tell him?
She tells Astor that the fear he is sensing isn't proof of his importance. It is proof that he has trapped others in the consequences of his actions.
Fear is not proof of your importance.
Wow. That is such a heavy, clarifying standard for anyone holding power.
It really is.
And that realization that Astor literally trapped these people in a fake reality is the perfect bridge to our next question. What happens to a human brain when it is suddenly unplugged from a reality it thought was permanent?
This is where things get really fascinating neurologically.
Because when Astor collapses the holding frame and restores the away team to the ship, the psychological remnants of the 1984 simulation come right back with them.
Which brings us to the therapy logs of acting chief engineer Ryan Collingway.
Yes, Ryan's sessions with counselor Chris Emerson offer this, like, crazy deep dive into the neurological reality of temporal trauma.
Because inside the anomaly, Ryan suffered complete amnesia regarding his Starfleet life. He fully blanked he was a 1984 college student.
Just a normal guy.
Right. And back on the ship, his original memories are restored. But the 1984 memories haven't vanished. They are actively coexisting in his mind. He describes it as a fake timeline, leaving behind real muscle memory. And he shares this story with the counselor that I found incredibly unsettling.
The soda craving, right?
Yes. So Ryan loves coffee. He always has. It's his standard drink. But he walked into the counselor's office and was hit by this overwhelming physical craving for a sugary pop.
Which he normally hates.
He absolutely hates sugary sodas. But he craved it simply because his 1984 alternate self drank it constantly.
We really need to look at the physiology of what is happening there. A habit isn't just an abstract thought, you know. It's a literal physical structure in the brain.
Wait, really? A physical structure?
Yeah, when you repeat an action, your brain coats that specific neural pathway in a substance called myelin. It acts like insulation on a wire, making the signal travel faster and faster every time you do it.
Oh, wow.
So even though Ryan's 1984 timeline was erased from objective reality, his brain physically manufactured those myelinated pathways while he was there.
So it's like, okay, it's like driving to a house you moved out of 5 years ago. Your brain physically paved a highway for that commute, and even though you don't live in the house anymore, even if the house was completely demolished, the highway is still there in your brain, practically begging to be driven on.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The infrastructure of the fake reality outlived the reality itself. It's a physical manifestation of a psychological ghost.
But my question is, how on earth does he do his job?
Well, that's the real struggle.
Right, because if I'm an engineer reaching for a hydro spanner and my ghost impulse makes me reach for a 1984 socket wrench, somebody could die. If your base impulses are being overridden, how do you trust your own mind when you're making critical decisions in a starship's engine room?
Ryan is wrestling with that exact fear. He confesses to Dr. Emerson that during the simulation, his 1984 persona was highly impulsive.
Super reckless.
Yeah, and in fact, that impulsivity is what caused him to rush ahead of the away team and get caught in the temporal wave in the first place.
Who's carrying all this guilt?
A massive amount of guilt. He fears that this ghost version of himself is fundamentally dangerous. But Dr. Emerson doesn't treat him like he's broken. She reframes the whole trauma for him.
I love her approach.
She's brilliant. She explains that his mind blended the timelines as a survival mechanism. His brain adapted to a hostile environment to just keep him functioning.
She tells him that surviving the simulation proves his psychological strength, not his weakness.
Exactly.
And instead of telling him to forcefully suppress or, surgically remove these ghost impulses, she gives him incredibly practical advice. She tells him to seek out an informal mentor.
Which is a brilliant strategy for behavioral management. You can't just wish away a myelinated neural pathway.
Right, the highway is already built.
Precisely.
Oh.
But you can build new, stronger pathways over time through conscious modeling. Emerson wants him to find someone who can help him channel that impulsive energy, which, frankly, is often just extreme curiosity, a vital trait for an engineer.
That makes a lot of sense. So Ryan takes this advice straight to his executive officer, Commander Batenburg.
Quite a leap of faith.
It is. He basically walks in and says, I have a ghost in my head that makes me impulsive, and I need guardrails. I kept expecting the XO to just pull him off duty immediately.
Right, that would be the standard protocol.
But instead, Batenburg respects the sheer self-awareness it takes to admit that, and he sets Ryan up with the ship's recovering former chief engineer, Sandra Boren. It's this fantastic transition from a psychological crisis to actual professional development.
It highlights a really healthy chain of command.
Ugh.
But, if we look at the broader crew, we see that trauma is never processed uniformly.
Oh, totally.
While Ryan is fighting his emotional impulses by seeking out a human connection, the chief science officer, Steve Remington, takes an entirely different approach.
Yeah.
Almost startlingly clinical approach to his compromised mind.
Steve's psych evaluation is wild to read, like truly wild. Like Ryan, Steve was trapped in 1984 and had his memory completely wiped. But Steve didn't rely on his brain to navigate the anomaly.
No, he relied on his equipment.
Right. He relied on a modified science tricorder that the team named Clyde. And during his therapy session, Steve drops this philosophical bomb. He tells the counselor, memory is evidence, but it's not primary evidence.
He essentially applies the rigid structure of the scientific method to his own human psychology.
Which is intense.
Very. Inside the anomaly, Steve learned firsthand that a human memory could be completely overwritten, suppressed, or just manufactured from scratch. Therefore, upon returning to the ship, he makes a conscious, radical decision. A memory cannot stand alone as absolute truth.
See, my theory when reading this was that Steve is just deeply traumatized and dissociating.
That's a fair assumption.
Because what he does is if a memory pops into his head, say a memory from the 1984 timeline, and it doesn't align with physical evidence, mission logs, or the tricorder data, he just tags it in his brain as unresolved.
Yes.
He literally treats his own mind like a Wikipedia page with a citation needed banner.
But I have to push back on this coping mechanism a bit.
Go for it. Detaching emotion from memory sounds almost sociopathic. Isn't it fundamentally terrifying to look at your own internal narrative and assume you are lying to yourself?
Well, for the vast majority of people, yes, it would cause a complete existential breakdown. But Dr. Emerson's notes revealed that Steve possesses an exceptionally high tolerance for uncertainty.
He's just wired differently.
He really is. He wasn't actually afraid of losing his memories. What terrified him was the prospect of losing the ability to know what is true.
Oh, always.
Think about the epistemology of that. He decides that emotional resonance has zero correlation with factual accuracy.
Right, because the sugary pop craving felt incredibly real to Ryan, but it was factually false.
Precisely. Stick decides that truth depends entirely on whether reality keeps agreeing with itself.
Whether reality keeps agreeing with itself, that's a great line.
If the tricorder data matches the visual evidence, which matches the star charts, that is the primary reality. The memory is secondary. If they conflict, the memory is discarded until further data proves otherwise. In a post-truth environment, or when your own perspective is compromised by stress, relying on external verifiable consistency is an incredibly powerful anchor. He is perfectly comfortable sitting in the dark and saying, I don't know yet, rather than clinging to a false memory just for comfort.
It's an absolute superpower. I mean, think about how many times you, the listener, have vividly remembered a childhood event, only for an old home video to prove it happened entirely differently.
It happens all the time.
Multiply that disorientation by 1,000, and that's what Steve is managing with pure logic. So we have Ryan rebuilding his reality through mentorship, and Steve rebuilding his through secondary evidence.
Both valid, both completely different.
Let's shift from the individual brains to the institutional brain of the ship. Because while the crew is in therapy, the command team has to somehow translate this cosmic absurdity into official fleet paperwork.
We enter the ready room with Captain Sabrina Corbin and Yeoman Elias Merrick. This is where the burden of subjective trauma really collides with the requirement of objective reporting.
I mean, writing an official Starfleet report about a reality-bending, godlike child is like trying to write a parking ticket for a hurricane.
That's the perfect analogy.
How do you force rigid, bureaucratic order onto pure chaos? Corbin is exhausted, and she is fighting this brutal war over semantics. She absolutely refuses to use the phrase childlike entity in the official log to describe Aster.
Right, she pushes back hard on that.
She insists Merrick use the term juvenile self-identification.
It seems like a minor linguistic distinction, but the captain's rationale is crucial here.
Why is she so hung up on it?
She refuses to let Starfleet get sentimental about a being that nearly destroyed her crew and fractured their minds. She understands that words dictate future tactics.
Oh, that makes sense.
If she softens the language in her report, she leaves the next ship that encounters a meridian completely vulnerable to underestimating them. She is actively guarding the shape of the truth.
But the cognitive load of holding the shape of that truth is just crushing her. You can feel the tension in the logs. The captain is practically vibrating with stress. And to cut that tension, Yeoman Merrick introduces a brilliantly unexpected solution.
I love this moment.
He accesses a playlist of 1984 pop music that the science teams recovered from the planet's radio broadcasts, and he just starts playing it out loud in the ready room.
It is a remarkable risk for a yeoman to take with a stressed commanding officer.
It really is. The music starts with Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time, and Corbin's initial reaction is pure defensive command posture. She tells him her cultural well-being has survived admirably without 20th century popular music.
Very formal, very rigid.
Exactly. But Merrick gently holds his ground. And soon they are sitting there, detailing the horrors of temporal displacement and ancient Klingon warships, all while listening to Prince, Madonna, and Wham!
We really have to look at why that specific intervention works on a psychological level.
Yeah, why pop music?
Captain Corbin has been forced to operate on a cosmic life-or-death scale. She's been managing omnipotent beings, temporal mechanics, and the safety of hundreds of lives. A 450-year-old pop song is the ultimate grounding mechanism.
Because it's so normal.
Exactly. It is fundamentally mundane. It forces the brain to step down from a state of hypervigilance and reconnect with simple, rhythmic predictability.
It brings her back to Earth, literally and figuratively. By the time Cyndi Lauper's True Colors comes on, and Corbin is finally preparing to transmit the final report to Starfleet Command, her walls have come down.
She finally exhales.
She admits the music is lovely. She notes that she can see why that century kept it around. It takes this heavy, impossible mission and suddenly makes it feel fragile and human again.
It connects her to the people she was protecting.
Right. It reminds her that the abstract civilians they were protecting on that planet were just ordinary people who liked listening to catchy songs on the radio.
The music recontextualizes her trauma. When you are constantly analyzing the mechanics of a crisis, it is very easy to lose sight of the humanity you were trying to preserve. Yeoman Merrick didn't offer her more analysis. He offered her a shared, simple human experience.
And that is often the most effective way to process the impossible.
It absolutely is.
Which perfectly sets up the final piece of this puzzle. We've seen how they cope individually with their minds and administratively with their logs. But how does a crew that had their shared reality shattered actually heal together?
The logs leave us with a very quiet, powerful scene down in the ship's mess hall.
With Ryan and Steve.
Yes. Ryan and Steve, the engineer fighting his impulses and the scientist detaching his emotions, are sharing a meal. They're trying to process their shared hallucination. And Ryan finally asks Steve a question that has been haunting him. During the 1984 simulation, before they regained their memories, before they even knew they were Starfleet officers, Steve came back for Ryan. He risked himself to pull Ryan out of the holding frame. And Ryan wants to know why. Why didn't Steve just save himself?
Steve's answer to this is incredible. He explains that even without his Starfleet memories, even without knowing their history, he instinctively knew their survival was tied together.
It's profound.
He tells Ryan they were like two keys that had to be used in tandem to open a lock.
It is a beautiful culmination of their psychological journey. It proves that beneath the Starfleet training, beneath the protocols, and even beneath conscious memory, there is a core operating system of honor and connection.
It's hardwired into them.
Exactly. The simulation wiped their identities, but it couldn't wipe their foundational character. Steve didn't need a mission log to tell him that you don't leave your partner behind.
That shared trauma forged a bond that literally transcended the artificial space and time Aster created. It shows that while a fake environment might leave you with a craving for a sugary pop, it can't rewrite your fundamental moral compass.
We have covered immense ground today in this deep dive.
We really have.
We've examined the catastrophic fallout of Aster's reality manipulation. We've seen how Ryan utilized mentorship to overwrite the neural pathways of a ghost, how Steve utilized a tricorder to verify reality against his own flawed memories, and how Captain Corbin utilized an ancient pop song to ground her command decisions in basic humanity.
The through line here is the sheer, stubborn resilience of the human mind when it is forced to rebuild its own foundation. But the real application of this deep dive isn't just for Starship crews, is it? It's for anyone navigating a world where information constantly contradicts itself.
Exactly. And I want to turn this focus directly to you, the listener. When you are faced with a situation that challenges your understanding of reality, whether it is a conflicting narrative at work, a personal relationship that suddenly shifts, or just the overwhelming flood of digital information, What are the tricorders you rely on?
What's your anchor?
Right. What is the verifiable evidence you seek out when your own memory, emotion, or perspective feels compromised by stress? How do you ensure that your reality keeps agreeing with itself?
It's the essential question of navigating the modern world, really. You have to know what your primary evidence is. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as we wrap up today.
Let's hear it.
We discussed how Astor's simulation left Ryan with a physical, biological habit from a life he didn't actually live.
The soda craving.
Yeah. So if a temporary fabricated environment can literally pave new highways in the brain and rewrite a basic physical impulse, how much of your own core identity is actually yours? And how much of who you are right this second is just the accidental product of the environments you've casually walked through?
Wow. An unsettling but necessary question to end on.
For sure. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning your assumptions, verify your primary evidence, and keep moving forward, even when reality doesn't seem to agree with itself.